You're all set.
Great, thank you. All right, good evening. Today is Thursday, November 2nd. I cannot believe it's November. My name is Susie Robinson, and I will call to order this meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee of the Bridgewater Town Council. I do note that we have a quorum to conduct business tonight. With me, we have Fred Chase, District 3 Councilor, and Brad McKinnon, Councilor at Large. We're going to commence a meeting as we do have a quorum present. First, I would like to read the COVID disclosure statement. The disclosure says, pursuant to Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2020, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency and the March 31st, 2025 extension granted by Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. This meeting for the town of Bridgewater will be fully remote and accessible to the public through remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance is permitted. Citizens who wish to tune into the meeting may do so via Zoom. Okay. Next on the agenda is the approval of meeting minutes. Our last CED meeting was July 25th. I feel like because we've met so many times and in between about CED overall for the initiatives going on that it feels like it was not that long ago, but it was. Anyway, does anyone have questions or comments on the previous minutes?
No.
No. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Great. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is public comment. Doesn't look like we have anyone from the public. Okay, all right, we can get to the business at hand. So new business tonight. Our agenda has one item. It is the discussion of election day signs. And this is in reference to a conversation that we did have with Town Clerk Hunt on September 19th. So just as a refresher, the proposal was to encourage more voters to come out during our annual town election. And so Clerk Hunt had recommended a consideration around all elected officials and the members of the Board of Registrars to take 10 signs each and place them prominently in their precincts, districts, etc. They would not be for any particular candidate, but merely to announce the date and to encourage people to vote during the annual town election. So the recommendation fundamentally is for us as individual councilors to contribute towards paying for these signs, placing them, and then maintaining them year to year as long as our terms extend. And then also just to recap, I think some of the basic feedback was that all of us were supportive, and we encourage the ability to put some kind of date placeholder on there, so that might require some stickers. And then Councilor Lindy had requested that we consider working with a union shop for printing. So I think that covers the summary. Anything else I might have missed?
No, but when it comes to the signs, I am for all of us getting the signs, figuring out a way to do it. But another thing that was brought up was the metal signs, like the DPW type signs saying bridge was out or something like that. I've been driving around town and kind of got 19 good points that if we were to do signs, we should definitely get some sort of signage there. I can read them all off if you want, but it's all over the town. You got 2 at the school, Auburn and Flag intersection, Walnut 104, end of Flag Street in Bedford, aka Route 18, Winter Street in South. These are all streets where there are islands too, so we could put public, it wouldn't be going on someone's yard, even if we own the first 5 feet. These are all on islands, these locations.
Yeah, great.
Elm Street 104, the Nip and Carver's Pond, 1 sign each. End of North Street and 104. Then you have that intersection, Main, High, and Center Street, where you would take a right to go onto High Street right now. That's closed. That one does not have an island, but I was thinking maybe on the corners near the signs or something. High Street and Broad and Hayward High Street intersection too. Those also don't have the islands, but great locations. And then front of the water station, maybe do something there. And then just one at Auburn and Old Farm, that intersection, which doesn't have one either, and Green Street in Vernon. Those are all kind of the locations where I feel people are going most in and out of constantly throughout the day.
Mm,
I feel like those would be good locations to try to help inform people. Yeah, the center would be nice, but there's not really an electrical sign or anything. And the sign that is in the center, only one person really looks at it, and that's if you're going south down 18. So maybe we should look into a little bit of better signage there. Maybe look at putting some sort of a sign where that the island is. Say you're going southbound on 18, like I was just saying, that island right there. So the people going north or coming from 28 can see it too, just as a reminder.
hmm
Like I said, I'm all for the individual signs too, but I think the town should probably just invest a little bit too into this, you know? I mean, I know the counselors, I looked into it. For other expenses, we have $560, and I wouldn't be against that going towards the signs either. And when I say other expenses, I do not believe that including, say, if we go to the conference in Worcester, or gas money or something like that, registration fee, et cetera, et cetera. But that's
Gotcha.
really odd.
Thank you. That is great that you audited, ideal spots. So thank you for that. Can I ask, would you mind maybe emailing that to Debbie so she can capture it as accurately as possible in the minutes?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Now, when you say the metal signs, but then you said electronic, are you talking about like those like sort of highway construction signs where they'll have the orange little LED lights?
No, just like the silver gray ones, just little tiny ones saying, "Oh, this park's up here if you take a right," or "This is over here." When I brought up the electrical sign, that was just for the center. You know, you go
Oh, okay.
Whitman, Rockland, all these towns right in front of just their town hall alone have these electrical signs that really capture
Mm,
people's attention more than just a wooden sign that gets changed, you know?
yeah. Okay, so you're talking metal signs, kind of like how like the highway department will put for permanent street signs.
Yeah, just not the orange ones, just
Yeah,
little gray, blue writing on it or whatnot, you know?
gotcha. Okay. I mean, I think it's probably something certainly that we could request be investigated in terms of cost. They're definitely not cheap.
Yeah.
I've done a fair amount of sign work in my marketing career, as well as exterior ones, temporary as well as permanent. But and maybe it's not a matter of covering every single point, right? But let's get it priced out.
Yeah, no, it would definitely would. 'Cause then you could just keep them forever, you know? They wouldn't weather like these signs that we would get would and all that.
Yeah. I do have to admit, I do have concerns with that. These, the signs that, are being proposed, they really are considered temporary for one season in
Mhm.
terms of like the substrate. And, I had actually put out some signs, not for our campaign, but for something completely unrelated to me being a counselor, and people just take them too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they do.
Yeah, so whether they don't like them or they're just taking them for whatever. So that was definitely one concern I had in terms of the longevity and the real, the reality of we're not going to be able to really store that many ourselves if our term ends. And it's a lot of logistical stuff for storage, but
So,
yeah.
good factor, and especially when you think our election time, it could be snow on the ground. You know, you
Mm,
could be getting hit by salt or even buried under 2 feet of snow, you know.
yeah.
So that's definitely a good point, is longevity with the signs if we were to get them.
Mm, okay. Any other thoughts or observations around the proposal from Clerk Hunt?
Well, I think, Susie, that I was looking over what the particular items that she referenced in her request, which is what she put before us at the meeting that you made note of. And she was actually very specific about her concept, which would utilize political yard signs, the kind that we're very familiar with, that are on kind of a plastic type of backing, that are protected against weather. And they simply insert very easily with a preformed metal stake, right? So now what she was speaking about specifically, she had an idea to order, I think her number was 250 of these pre-printed, simply with the message that a town election rather, would be conducted on the next coming Saturday. So these would only be used for a period of a week.
Oh yeah, that's a good point too. They're not out for weeks and weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So what she was envisioning was, just a week's worth of public notice during those, 7 days immediately preceding the election itself in April. So, and I know the discussion at our meeting did turn to other kinds of signage, and specifically that type of metal signage that Brad referred to, I know was mentioned as a possibility. Obviously, it would be a more permanent and I think a more costly endeavor, and I don't think we would likely be ordering 250 of them. But it's good that Brad did actually scout out a lot of suitable locations, and I agree. Certainly traffic islands are an appropriate place so that we're not inadvertently putting these on anyone's property. So I guess what I think we need to respond to more directly is Mrs. Hunt's request, specifically, because she promised to us she was actually going to price it out and look for a union shop, which was a request that one counselor had made, and come up with some very specific proposals. And I think her idea also was that the counselors, I think that all elected officials in the town would voluntarily contribute toward the purchase of these signs. I guess that's a great concept, but let's face it, there is no one would be required to do this. She's just looking for a cooperative arrangement. I don't know whether we might find that half of all the elected officials might be willing to do it, or maybe some greater number. I don't know. I frankly would be willing to bet whenever my first stipend check might be received 5 years from now, I'd be willing to bet my check that not 100% compliance would be achieved from all town officials. But I do think that, she's put before us somewhat informally, but fairly specifically, her particular request. I think that firstly, finances is one big consideration here, because, it's one thing if we are all going to contribute voluntarily out of our own pocket. That's something we can talk about, but again, there's no enforcement mechanism here. And obviously, otherwise, if we're looking for the town to purchase these signs, that would be something we would need to fashion a little differently and put together an order to be proposed, and for the council to vote on presenting it to the town manager to seek a budget item for that purpose. So I guess I'm not sure what would be the cost of the more permanent metal type sign, but I think, Susie, you're probably right that it's likely to be a more significant expense. For the purpose of Mrs. Hunt's proposal, she provided an estimate of $2,900.
Mhm.
So again, I guess based on her wishes, this is something she would hope that would be divided among 9 counselors, presumably also school committee members from Massachusetts, from Bridgewater, library trustees, and herself, since we are the only elected officials.
Mm.
So I'm not sure what that final breakdown would be, but it's a little bit of a hit that maybe we weren't anticipating. But the alternative is for to find a way for the town to pay for it. So any thoughts on that particular thorny issue?
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded us around the part, it was all elected officials. I think that that's a really fair point, that may be a bit of a stretch to expect that, and they're not even in these conversations either. We would need to have a series of conversations with them about it, right? I also too, fundamentally, the election and the core of the communications around the election is fundamentally the responsibility of the town clerk office, as well. So it feels appropriate that we should consider an option to see if there could be some kind of capital, investment. I really do like the idea of metal signs. There's just so many things about it that, feels right in terms of,
Mhm.
Because the other thing too is like there's an aspect around installation, right? That would not necessarily, even if we help fund something like a more permanent sign, I'm not really sure we're the outfitters to do it, right? So we would really have to rely on the temporary ones. And I think our spirit was, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And then it was sort of like, yeah, we really think about the logistics of it all. And then the cost implication. We are asking others who are not compensated, and who do we do give and volunteer our time, for sure. And there's some level of, minor ancillary expense being an elected official that we do shoulder as well. And then for those who do have to campaign, there's an aspect around that as well. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think it's definitely worth exploring options, to see, if the town could allocate some funds for additional communication.
So I think that's one thing we should at least consider pursuing. But I think so. In addition, just on that point of metal signs, I guess that if um, it would probably be helpful if we actually had a specific sample of a sign in mind that we could say,
Mhm.
here's what we're thinking, something this size, kind of like the sign that you used over here to do such and such.
Right.
Whether it's a street closed or, hydrant flushing or, some signage maybe that we already have that we can look at as an example and say, okay, price that out for us, because again, what we're thinking here is something that would be, at least according to Mrs. Hunt's proposal, would be a 1 week duration, typically once, or I guess actually maybe probably twice a year. April for the town election and then maybe for a
Right.
general election in November. And of course, as to the metal sign, then it's a question of how it's to be placed. Does it need some kind of, stand or stanchion or standard, or how is it going to be mounted? Or, this is something that I think we'd almost have to look at a sample and say, yeah, something like this would be good to put on an island for 1 week at a time. Now, you might remember that we did receive an email from the assistant town manager who pointed out all of the various channels through which the town communicates messages.
Mhm.
I thought was very helpful, and it was good to see. If I'm correct, I don't think she actually mentioned the town council. Ironically enough, maybe she did, but obviously the town council does provide one avenue through which we disseminate information to the public.
Mhm.
We do it obviously through our legislation that we debate and vote on, but we also do it through just, twice each meeting having a public forum for people to, make known their thinking,
Mhm.
in other ways. So the town council itself is one avenue for public dissemination of official town information.
Yeah,
But
actually, oh, sorry, go ahead,
oh,
sorry.
no, no. But yeah, I was thinking that, notably, um, Kimberly also pointed out that we have 3 changeable letter signs, which are
Mhm.
permanent. We have one at the Bridgewater, what's it called? The Bridgewater Nursing Home, at the corner of, Pleasant and South.
Mhm.
We have another one right at the corner of Main and Broad, right on the corner of the sort of the Walgreens parking
Yeah.
lot. And we have another one on Main Street. It's some distance away from the center of town. It's for people kind of coming into town by way of Main Street. So I know we have at least those 3 locations that are permanent. And as one member of the public pointed out at our last meeting, those signs are typically used to, as they are right now, in fact, to notify residents about tax deadlines.
Yep.
Coming up. Now, Brad has also mentioned the electronic message boards. And we know that we've used them for various purposes. Obviously, they're useful for emergencies or street closures, such as in connection with the High Street Dam project.
Mhm.
I'm thinking that, barring the need for them in connection with some emergency situation, they otherwise would probably be available simply to make, to promote word about an upcoming election. So those are existing. And obviously our town clerk is aware of them, but and I understand her position, she absolutely wants to encourage greater voter participation in all elections. That's part of her job, and that's a laudable thing to promote. So I guess we'd have to consider, part of what we're doing, consider the expense factor. And I think we somehow need to respond more directly, specifically to Mrs. Hunt's request,
Mhm.
since she had a very specific proposal before us. So I don't know, any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I think just from a process standpoint and in terms of, setting topics for meeting agendas, etc. Is this just a matter of we invite her back? Or is it something that I could simply email a summary of some follow-up questions? Um, or,
Well, I think,
or does this need to become a legislative action?
well, that's the question. To the extent that it's a kind of volunteer thing that,
Mhm.
we as counselors are doing because we want to want to contribute something of our own work, of our own design to benefit the town and its voters. Well, that's wonderful. That's all well and good. But that's one category. It's something that we would take on ourselves as a project that we would pay for out of pocket individually on a voluntary basis. Or is it something that we think is actually, more suitable as a town expenditure? Something that can be reused. I know that only once have I purchased election signs, and I've used them over again, even given the fact that I had to make changes to some because I no longer represent exclusively precinct 4. So I had to modify my signage in respect of that because of our re-precincting. So those signs, political yard signs, are reusable. And I think that if we were, I think part of her idea as well was that we would each take possession of a certain number of them
Mhm.
and put them in places within our own districts, within our own neighborhoods. So I guess, that was just another, I think, component of what she had suggested. I think the big factor here is cost, and it's a decision as to, do we think we can speak for 9 counselors and X number of additional elected officials of the town in saying that, oh yeah, we'll all kick in X dollars each. It's
Right.
it's a question, as opposed to using the town clerk's own figure of $2,900. Do we write an order for the town manager to to budget the amount of $2,900 for this purpose, and to make it a function of the town clerk's office to take care of putting them in place?
Mm.
Yeah,
I definitely am leaning more towards the latter. I think it's more realistic. I think it's also appropriate.
yeah. I mean, I am inclined. I'm just not sure. I mean, she has spoken directly to each of us through our meeting, so she's approached 9 people with the notion, and of course, it was then forwarded on to us, referred to us for discussion. I don't want to, suggest that, any number of us would be unwilling to contribute. But I think, first of all, unless we have each an idea of what dollar amount each of us would be expected to pay,
Correct.
I think we're all willing to contribute something. But I think by that same token, we all have different means, and it's certainly not, we're in an inflationary period. We're in a seasonal period where heating costs and holiday shopping come into play, and there are a lot of factors to be considered. So I don't know if it's really wise for us to, exactly bank on, so to speak, everyone contributing out of pocket. And it is a town, it's a matter of town business. And we certainly, it's to benefit the entire town, because we want to encourage voter participation. It's not that we're individually benefiting from this, except to the extent that all elected officials would be benefiting from it if we have a greater turnout.
Right. So, so again, we have a couple of options here. Is it, I think to your point, do we write an order, which is a possibility? But first, are we skipping a step about vetting this idea? Do we need to go back to our fellow counselors and float this thinking by them?
I definitely feel like we should get in touch with the library trustees and the school committee. That's for sure. Because I mean, if we're including everyone, has Miss Hunt talked to them? I mean, I don't doubt she hasn't, but that's just, we should all be on the same page on something like that. Just, I mean, the order, I just think it's smart if everyone's on the same page before we try to push anything forward, see where everyone's head at, including the council, but especially the board of trustees and the library and the school committees for Bridgewater, those members. I think it's 4 or 5, I think, for Bridgewater there, and then the library's 3.
So I think the question is really, has Clerk Hunt had those conversations?
Yes.
I mean, we can talk to our fellow counselors, but it feels like the presentation should also come from her to the other bodies. So,
and I believe, just in that regard, I think that her message, her email, did reach all of the elected officials. Now, whether she's received responses back from any of those folks or not, that's a question. Maybe she already has a sense you know,
Oh, she did. You're right. I'm looking, I'm looking at the email again. You're right. She did address it to the school committee members as well as the library, of trustees. Yeah.
so she was going to respond to us in connection with, I think, a couple of things. I think she said, I think one was like, finding someone, finding someone to prepare the signs that she had in mind.
Mm.
She apparently already had done some preliminary pricing, so she came up with a number, but
Yeah.
maybe she's also had some feedback. I think, we probably want to ask her about that. Has anyone responded to you in connection with this? And maybe there are other ideas that have arisen. I guess it might be best to do that, and we could even do that. I mean, very informally. I think we could do it partly by, sending her an email to kind of ask for an
Yeah.
update. We
Yeah,
had some
I'll
discussion.
definitely do that. I'll ask for the follow-ups in terms of the other follow-ups. Although the one thing I do want to kind of mention, I know that Counselor Lindy had requested a union shop.
Yeah.
My whether they're union or not, my preference would be to keep the business in Bridgewater.
Okay, right, and that makes sense. I don't disagree with that. I think that if the pricing is something that is competitive, then yeah, sure, we certainly should. We know we have at least one business in Bridgewater that engages in this, and so I'd certainly like to keep that business local if that makes sense. So,
Right.
and I know the suggestion was made as to a union shop. I certainly personally am very supportive of unions, so I'm inclined to agree. But we also do need to consider, as you pointed out, I think the fact that we want to patronize businesses here in town
Mhm.
at every opportunity we can.
Yep. Okay, so I will follow up with her via email so around the actual follow-ups of some of our feedback. And then also ask her if she has not heard from the other elected officials to schedule meetings with them, whether they're public or individual as she needs, because we're going to need specifically accurate estimates of how many people are contributing so that we understand the full costs before we can make any further decisions, whether or not to move forward.
I think so. I think that does
Yeah.
make sense at this point.
Okay,
Oh,
Can
good.
agree.
great. So the other piece then we should talk about is, in addition to signs, what can we do as counselors?
Right.
I think that there've been actually what I was thinking about our last counselor comments in our last town council meeting. It's really nice that there are so many things that we bring up from, the community in terms of like, hey, this is going on, let's support those in our community. So there is this aspect of like, we are trying to also be like the mouthpieces or help kind of the megaphone, right, for some of our community organizations, because we know we've got this additional reach due to the positions that we're in. So as we think about that, I know social media is something that some of us are active in, but not all. But what other types of ways can we as counselors be useful and helpful in encouraging voters to come out more?
I mean, I think Dennis really does a good job with the whole coffee with the counselor thing. He does that, I think, quarterly, 4 times a year. I think he does it. I'm not saying that promotes people to go out and vote, but just getting out there, going to a local business, inviting other people to come hang out, talk, see what's going on with the town and other people's aspects of it and opinions and all that. Definitely give him kudos for that, because I live right above Bridgewater Bagel. You can find that out just looking at the ballot. And it's definitely cool going down there and seeing him engage with a lot of people, because it's usually at least 5 people with him. It's always different faces. He does good there. I'll definitely give him credit for that.
Yeah.
I mean, wish there was more events in Bridgewater that we could all get together at, but I mean, what's the next one? Christmas on the Common. We could all be there, try to engage. I mean, most of us do go to events if we can.
Well, just one other, since you mentioned it though, Brad, is maybe it's not the perfect venue, but a possibly the senior center will be hosting their annual Veterans Day event. And it's always very well attended. I've attended it for at least a couple of years. And they feature the singing trooper, and it's, you know, it's a very it's a very fun event, certainly for everyone in attendance. It's a lot of patriotic songs and things like that. And
Mhm.
so maybe it's not the best way to engage conversationally with people with all this going on, um, but I do attend it. I did ask Debbie to pass along my RSVP. I believe that Counselor Lindy intends to attend, or I know he passed along information about it. It's at least one opportunity where, you know, we are together with a good number of people, or Bridgewater citizens. You know, I also think back to, for example, for our downtown revitalization event at the school, at the Mitchell School. Of course, that was a great event because we were able to really talk quite a bit one-on-one with a large number of people. Of course, we were focused on a particular topic, but there were other conversations that took place as well. And yes, it's important for us to try to take advantage of opportunities for face-to-face contact. And you know, it's not always easy to do because you know, we have our own lives. People are going about their own affairs, you know, shopping and commuting and on their way to work. Kind of hard to engage with people sometimes. But events like that do provide an opportunity. And yes, I agree. I certainly think that Dennis does a great job with his you know, coffee with the counselor events.
I mean, like, should we be wearing buttons when we show? I hate buttons, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. But do you know what I mean? It's almost like this visual thing of like, don't forget annual election, April 20, you know, whatever it might be, right? Because sometimes, so it's good to be at these events, but we're not thinking about April, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, so I don't know. Yeah, because I think you're right. There is something about like how to take advantage of that.
Maybe we could even look at what Bob did with that whole downtown revitalization event when he went to all these local businesses, put up these flyers here or these little pamphlets. I'm not saying we need to get pamphlets and all that, but maybe just ask every business, hey, can we put this little 10 by 10 cutout here? You know, go vote April 29th or whatever day it is.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses around town, you walked in and that was one of the first things you saw. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
how all the good locations, but he did really well with that. And I really think that, yeah, we were all on the Facebook too. His whole Facebook team over there was on there too, promoting it. But I
Yeah.
really, how much they went out and talked to businesses and got involved with them, I really think that definitely helped out too.
And, you know, there is something to be said about a simple, cheap and cheerful, like printable flyer, right?
Yeah.
So that's something, you know, I'm thinking, of course, because having a marketing background, I'd be happy to design a little flyer that could be emailed to all the counselors and print it out, or, you know, just make copies of it somewhere in color that's relatively inexpensive. And to your point, like, you know, hey, let's ask this local business, do you mind putting this up on your door for a week, kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Even
like
in town offices, conceivably. I mean, at the obviously
Mhm.
clerk's office itself, or elsewhere in the academy
Yeah.
building, or in the senior center or the library. Um, so I think there are opportunities like that for us to, you know, have a little greater presence in terms of the, you know, of an imminent election. Uh,
Mhm.
People do forget. I mean, you know, it's, remember this year I pointed out to the council, we're going to have a March presidential primary. Now, even though Massachusetts is not going to be a particularly a big factor nationally in the election this year, nonetheless, all of our congressmen in Massachusetts are going to be running for re-election this year. So people will be enticed to vote in March. Are they going to be again reminded to vote in April? That's our challenge. our town election, for better or worse, it takes place at a kind of an awkward time because, at the end of April, we're just beginning to do springtime things, and school vacation week kicks in, and it's kind of a
Little League, it's always opening day of Little League too.
well, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Sports like that are coming on board, so it is a tough time, and I know someone pointed that out to us. Well, periodically people do point that out to us, that maybe it's not the best time for an election, but I think Mrs. Hunt herself has commented about the difficulties of the election calendar on previous occasions. So I think there are opportunities, and I did like seeing the list that that Mrs. Williams forwarded to us about the channels that are already used.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, we are taking advantage of everything that seems to be rather obvious and rather, predictable, and things we should expect to do. I'd love to think that we could come up with something that's actually a little unique and a little more, out of the box thinking, that would be something unexpected and kind of catch people unaware, and might be very, very productive.
You know what, what do you think about, like, what if we hosted or came for like a little meet the counselors day at like BR and like met with the seniors? Or met with just whatever, or general assembly, if we could like show up at one point, and just talk about our civic duty as we get older to vote. And it's, obviously not a partisan thing. It's just truly hey, I don't think we've ever done that before, right? As counselors, like gone to the high school and like even as like a few people, I could be wrong. Maybe people did it way back in the day, but
I'm
I'd
not
be willing to
aware
do
of it.
something.
I mean, it's a good point. I think that, it's kind of the role that, what do I think of do they still exist? The League of Women Voters would put together a, type of candidate awareness thing for an upcoming election, that type of thing. And just to encourage voter registration,
Yeah.
that's always a good kickoff to kind of encouraging voting. That's another good idea. The only problem I see with that, I think the main problem I see with that is that, when would that take place at a convenient time for everyone? I mean, we know that we can usually get 9 people together for, every other Tuesday night. We certainly
Yeah, I
would
mean,
have,
maybe it's not everybody, right? So it could just be maybe a
right.
couple of people who can flex in their schedule kind of thing,
Yeah, no, but you're right. And that's partly what I think that Eric had been discussing back a few meetings ago.
Mm,
When we specifically, I know we mentioned Dennis's coffee with the council, and we were looking for other ideas to kind of make ourselves accessible and reachable by the public. It is hard. If we just look at the example that we know of firsthand, for example, when we need to get signatures to get ourselves on the ballot for an election, we need to reach out to people, whether it's, door to door in our neighborhood, or, to meet people at Roach Brothers or at some other common point in town. It's kind of difficult to grab people unexpectedly and just engage with them for a couple of minutes.
yeah.
It is important to try to do, but I know that, it's something that not everyone, not every member of the public really wants to do that. There are people, let's not forget, who just don't want to hear about it.
I don't know. I get that, but it's sort of I think that the more we can, yeah. And
No, we try to overcome it. You're right.
yeah, this isn't to convince people who will never vote to go vote. This is just a healthy reminder of like, hey, there's lots of people who, I will say, I feel like that since COVID, and particularly with the school committee, there are way more people engaged than they used to be. They're paying attention in other ways, right? There's also been a lot more complaints as well, but there is a little bit of a heightened,
That's true.
recognition of like, oh, I guess I should pay attention because, and I think the school committee thing is a little bit different, of course, because of the way COVID affected the schools, right? But anyway. All right, so let me do this little quick rundown. And by the way, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I'm also happy to, with the marketing hat on, create little social media kits, like just something that every single, send it out to every single counselor. For those of us who use social media, then you got an easy, couple of easy graphics to use,
Mhm.
that kind of thing, so that you don't have to come up with it as well as copy that you can either tailor to make it your own or literally just copy and paste, right? So it makes it easier for everybody. So I'm more than happy to do that as well, because I do tend to do that for my own, obviously when I was I wouldn't really say I was campaigning that hard, but but when I was campaigning and then, in general, I will do those sort of things. And then we talked about printable flyers. Again, I'm happy to do some of that design work, and get those files out to people. Coffee with the counselor, thinking about what kind of events could we create individually to help raise awareness. Taking advantage of face-to-face contact when we're at events. And then, like I said, maybe it's to meet the counselors, or, is there something going on at BR that we could plug into and show up at and just say, hey, don't forget to vote, or remind your family to, your voting family or members and friends to go vote, that sort of thing, like some kind of go where the people are, right? And that's something as well, actually, I'm about to send an email to everybody as well that, there's like a NFL flag football league that was started in Bridgewater. Like the BISA and all the other team sports, stuff like that. Like maybe there are opportunities where we can kind of help show up and canvas a little bit, in terms of reminding people that election day is coming up. So
Mhm. Well, we have time, but I think you're right. To get some ideas together,
yeah.
it's good to begin now. And if we're thinking about that next coming election in April, it's something we do have some time to plan for, and I think it's good that we begin to think about it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Anything else?
I don't know that we covered a lot, even if it doesn't seem like we came up with a lot. But I think
You got a good way.
Yeah, I think we did. Okay, great. Well, like I said, I will follow up with Mary Lee. And Debbie, thank you as always for helping us out and capturing minutes. So if we have no further business, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So
to adjourn.
Yep.
Okay.
second.
Let's all say aye.
And we'll
All
do a
right.
vote.
We'll go to a vote. Yeah. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, aye. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thanks so much, guys.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right,
Thank you,
have a
Deb.
good night.
You too.